My name is Elise Beckles, and everyone has a story. I believe that evolving takes place when we tell these stories. I felt a heart tug to position myself as a growth conduit, both of myself and of others. We evolve by telling our stories, which hopefully encourages others around us to do the same. Join me as we evolve. I strongly believe that teachers are the heartbeat of our society. Growing up, our teachers could probably be spotted miles away. Why? Because they often looked and spoke a certain way. In our ever-evolving society, teachers play an even more integral role in shaping the minds and narratives of a world that looks vastly different than when I was growing up. Jay Williams teaches us that true impact occurs when we lead with authenticity. How we are raised and where we are raised gives us a lens to connect with people in a way that can create long-lasting effects. Being yourself and speaking about your lived experiences are the real lessons that stick, and Jay gracefully teaches us just that. Jay, I am incredibly excited to be sitting here and chatting with you today, so welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
Yes. I was really looking forward to sitting down with you. I think I shared with you before that we had wanted to sit with you a little bit earlier, but COVID. There needs
Pandemic,
to be
right?
Yes. There needs to be an entire series called But COVID.
Of course.
But that's another story.
In spite of.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So Jay, when I chatted with you earlier, I don't know how you felt about it, but in the moment, I considered you an other. And an other in that there are so many people, like we see them online, we see them in real life, and sometimes you start to notice like there's templates of individuals. And in my observations of you, I consider you an other, and I usually feel most connected to others because they're the people who don't exactly look like everyone else, or you expect something and they give you something a little bit different.
Right.
So that's always a lot more interesting for me. So Jay, talk to me, like, where are you from? Where did you grow up? What was Jay's childhood like?
Remind me, I want to come back to the others piece, so
Okay.
let's take a pin in that for now. But so my name is Jay Williams. I'm from Scarborough, Ontario, the east side specifically, from Malvern, and I'm very proud of that.
Love it.
Malvern's been painted with this negative kind of rep, and I think I knew that from a very early age. I was exposed to that, and wanted to prove it wrong. I knew the stereotypes, but I really wanted to disprove a lot of what they said about, people from my community in the news, in and around how we interacted with police. So knowing all that at a very young age, I was very aware of those stereotypes and purposely went out to try and disprove them throughout my adolescence. Yeah, so I grew up in a house with 10 people, a very loving home. I wouldn't say we were poor by any means. We're filled with love and food always. A Jamaican household, we always had food, but it was tight. I never knew any difference in terms of not having money, because to us, we were rich, but I mean, my hand-me-downs or my first pair of Nikes were from my girl cousin, who's like my sister.
Okay.
Right? I remember writing air on the back of those in pencil and getting clowned at school because, that's what I knew. But I say that to say humble beginnings always lead to, or hopefully lead to, an opportunity to excel later on in life. And
Yes.
if we fast forward to where I'm at, I think I'm doing a pretty good job so far.
I would say so too, and I love that. I love when, first of all, there is that respect for your upbringing. I know a lot of people shy away if the story isn't glamorous,
Right.
or if it's not, something that most people, maybe in your environments, not everyone can connect to an experience like that. A lot of people grow up differently, but perhaps those who have immigrant parents
Right.
and come here can find that connection through
100%.
that. So 10 people in a home.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Right.
So how did you find that? Like, did you feel like you were treated as an equal? How does 10 people still let you be yourself and become yourself?
Well, I'll start with this. I mean, my grandmother, Lily Senior, was the head of the household, the matriarch, and led with an iron fist, but with a loving iron fist, we'll say. So rest in peace to my grandmother, who passed away in 2017. But she essentially led by example. She showed us hard work. She showed us perseverance. She showed us love and respect and fear all wrapped up into one. And for that, we're forever grateful. So I was learning lessons from a very early age that I never really internalized until much later. But luckily, I also had positive examples in the way of my mother, aunts and uncles, who were a little closer to me in age. And, unbeknownst to them, potentially, or maybe they did know, again, provided examples of what it really meant to go out there and bust your ass and essentially make something of yourself, even though the world's counting you out or counting against you.
Right on.
So through them, by all means, showing me what it meant to, be an athlete, be a student athlete, go to university, graduate from university, get jobs, get married. I definitely had those examples, and I was able to, again, put that towards what I wanted to see for my future.
That's great. So you spoke about you went to university. Was that so you lived in, we're going to air quote it, at-risk neighborhood?
Yep.
Okay, but you were an athlete. Did you use that? Was that your only driver? Like, he's an athlete, so we got to push that. Like, tell me about that whole athletic and academic connection.
The merge of the two? Yeah. I'd even add one third branch to that too, because community, as I mentioned before,
let's do it,
was also a major factor in who I was trying to become in my identity. So we mentioned the other piece before, and how I envisioned myself was, I'm a student, I'm an athlete, I'm gonna get good grades, I'll play basketball, but I also need to impact my community as well. So in being that other, existing in that space of kind of no specific kind of role, which I very much pushed back against, I kind of existed in this space where, I sold patties at lunchtime.
Oh my goodness.
Right? I helped our guidance counselor, rest in peace to Mr. Destiny, raise money for barrels that he was sending back to Haiti.
Okay.
Right? But I mean, at the same time, I could hang with my friends on the basketball team or play salad in the long hallway. Y'all remember that?
Yeah.
So I was able to coexist and kind of swim or navigate these different worlds, but all very cognizant of the time that I had a bigger goal. So I went to Mother Teresa. I was recruited to go there and coming out of grade 8. And my vision was to get a scholarship. That's all I cared about. So I knew that if I could get some school to pay for my university, I would have a leg up on the game. I'm not going to graduate with $50,000 in debt from OSAP, over the case is. So not to gloss over and make it sound like it was all, greatness in terms of what I experienced, I signed and went to Life University in Atlanta, Georgia. What no one tells you is that when you sign a scholarship, you're signing for a year, essentially, not 4 years.
Okay.
So when I got injured in my very first year, and they sent me home for having to have knee surgery. And when I had knee surgery in Toronto and called my coach up and said, I'm ready to come back, he's like, nah, big fella, we gave your spot away. We're good.
Whoa.
Yeah, so, I mean, life-altering moment for sure. So I'm home at this point. I'm trying to figure out what's next. I'm depressed. I lean on my support, who's my mother, and she's like, you could be sad for a minute, but you got to suck it up now. Like, what other schools are trying to hit you up? And I had a school in Florida, but they're only willing to give me a half scholarship because it was late into the season. And I had Windsor, and I had Dalhousie and Halifax. Were willing to, give some money towards school, whatever the case was. And I wasn't going to Windsor because, no disrespect to them, but everybody from Scarborough at the time, where Toronto was going.
Right, you weren't trying to be back home away, right?
it comes back to that other piece, right? If everyone's doing that, I'm gonna do this.
Right.
So I went out to Halifax, sight unseen. Talked to the coach. He's like, yeah, come up. We'll figure it out in terms of the money piece and living and all that. But it was an eye opener. It was an eye opener. It was shocking. In my res, I was one of 3 Black people out of 200. So I went from, remember, Scarborough, Filipino, Black, brown, Atlanta, Black, certain white pockets, to Halifax, which, unbeknownst to me, I thought there was a high amount, and there was, which I found out eventually or later on, but I cried. I was ready to go home. I said, this can't be it. But it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me. I was able to, again, be exposed to different cultures, different ways of thinking, different ways of living. Negative situations too, where people saw me differently. And they wanted to paint me into that picture that they, big black male, covered in tattoos, plays basketball, so you must be this. Oh, wait a second, you go to school too, and you take it seriously, and you got a plan? So, no, it definitely exposed me to a different world, and I was able to not just be there, but excel and strive.
That's great.
Appreciate it.
Wow, and I didn't even know about the whole school number one, right? That could take someone out as in, I'm over it.
Right.
But thankfully your mom was that. It's not even tough love, that's real love, right? Love is real, where it gives you the moment to, okay, let's have a moment,
right,
but we're gonna get up and we're gonna get on to the next thing. So that is powerful. That is so, so powerful. And so you finished school.
Yeah.
And what were you taking? Like, what were you hoping to do? Were you wanting to keep on in the athletics field, or what were you trying to do after?
Of course. So every basketball player, that's their dream, is to play professionally. Unfortunately, by that time, I had 3 surgeries. I couldn't practice one day and then play the next. So if we had a game, I either did a walk around in practice or played in the game, but I couldn't do both at that point. So basketball became more like a job, which you'll hear a lot of athletes say. And it just wasn't as fun anymore. I did have a couple opportunities to potentially go overseas to Australia, but once they saw my medical records, they're like, yeah, big fella, this ain't it. So I thought about coaching, and I was assistant coach at Dalhousie for 2 years after I finished, which was super cool. And during that time, I also, so my degree's in life sciences, and I was doing some programming for Diabetes Canada, for Health Canada, for local hospitals. So I thought about that too. Again, community in terms of giving back. I think the reason why I decided not to go into coaching is that coaches in Canada don't make no money.
Okay, that's so honest. Yeah, we love that.
Very, very real. I remember seeing, he's still my guy to this day, my head coach at that time. He's the head coach of UFT now. And at that time, I remember seeing, I don't know if he knows this, but hopefully he'll see this. He was re-signing for a negotiation, and it was $70,000 he was signing for. And at this point, he had a family, 2 kids, a wife, and I'm like, 70 racks is not the move.
Yeah.
All right, so I think that was eye-opening for me. But I think everything comes back to my mother in terms of direction and as you mentioned, real love, not just tough love. She said, you've been out of school now for 2 years, you're still in Halifax, what's your plan? And she made a deal with me to apply to one teacher's college back in Toronto. And if I got in, she'd pay for half. I applied. I didn't think too much of it, too seriously of it, because in my mind, I wanted to, be a man, stand on my own 2 feet. And I got in. So in 2008, I believe, I was on a plane, packed up everything in Halifax and moved back.
Okay, so you finished your first year of school. What grade was that you taught?
Grade 7.
Grade 7.
Yeah. I've only ever taught middle school, so grade 7, 8, yeah.
Okay, and you were still kind of unclear. So year 2, you go back.
Year 2, I go back.
And what happens?
I'm still, dealing with the microaggressions, nonsense. I remember that first year, if I can go back for a second, being in the staff room and hearing a teacher say, so-and-so in my class, let's say student T, said the N-word again, but he never said the N-word. He literally said the full-out word. And I'm looking around as the only black person in this staff room thinking, this ain't right, but not having the words or the voice to kind of respond to that, and not having someone to confide in the school as like an OG or someone I could hurt or a step to kind of figure that piece out. So yeah, not knowing at the time, there were certain chinks that were happening in my armor, kind of taking away at really why I was doing this, or asking myself, is this what I want to do moving forward? But the light at the end of the tunnel for me has always been the kids. Through teaching, obviously, but mainly through mentoring, through coaching, through connecting with quote unquote troubled kids, through connecting with kids who look like me and where I come from and understand the language and that I speak and vice versa. I can understand the language they speak, because they're not going to get that from time to time. There's been multiple times where I've heard, you're the first black teacher, let alone black male teacher I've had. And when I mentioned before teaching in middle school, like that's, you're at an impasse in your life where you're about to either figure some stuff out or potentially take a road less traveled, or I guess often traveled at this
Sure.
point, that doesn't necessarily end up in the best results for you in 20 years from that time. So I've chosen that age because I know I can make an impact. You feel me?
Yeah, totally. Honestly, that makes me so happy because I know growing up, people usually have one teacher they can connect to, but there wasn't in my memory a teacher that looked like me. Maybe
Right.
half looked like me, but not all the way looked like me.
Yeah.
So to know that you are a present day example to people, to students, even to parents, it's important we change a parent's perspective as well, right?
Right.
Because you're not in the homes, you're not at the dinner table when there are different stories or people learn stereotypes. They're being taught in the
100%.
home, right? So
Yeah.
for you to be that other in the classroom, that's transformative, like in and of itself. So thank you.
100%.
Thank you for
Appreciate
that.
that.
So for me, what I want to understand the most, because I sometimes interact with a lot of families. So I do something to do with education as well. And our young colored boys are often not as nurtured
Right.
in environments that they should be. And I hate to pull them out of the pack, but I think we have to pull them out of the pack in order to address some of the things, the deep-rooted things. So what have your observations been about our young Black and brown boys? What have you seen to be maybe some of the key issues? And how do you feel you have perhaps contributed to their growth, or like how have you influenced them specifically?
Right. So I would start by agreeing with you 100%. It sucks that we have to pigeon or put a pin in terms of singling those boys out, but
Yeah.
it needs to be done. Not even wanting to get into the number side of things, but numbers have shown, right, through data and statistics, that these young men are suspended at a higher rate, expelled, put into spec ed, and young women too, but just talking about the boys, they read at oftentimes lower rates at very younger ages. And all of that sets them up for failure, essentially, right? And then if you combine the school system, which is a white Eurocentric system, and then look at the prison system, it's essentially very similar. There are a lot of similar pathways, I'll say, that you end up either one leads to the other. I'll stop there because I don't want to get too deep into that. But yeah, I've definitely noticed it. I mentioned before that I mentor. So I've created mentoring programs at every school I've been in. And I hand pick the young men I want to work with.
Oh, that's great.
I appreciate that. I don't dance around the need for it with my principals. For the most part, they've all been pretty supportive. And in these groups, there's a combination of interpersonal communication, right? So we're going to talk about life. We're going to talk about what it means to be a man. We're going to talk about relationships with women and how you should treat women. We're going to talk about your expectations for your future and how you can arrive at them, setting goals, all of these important things. And then there's also a physical component, because I understand how important the bonding with your peers are, bonding with another young man at that age is. So I've been running that for ever at this point. I recently just changed the name to Where There's a Will, There's a Way, and the kids have really...
That's fun.
Yeah.
I get that reason why. That's cool.
Yeah. A little play on the name, but
Yes.
yeah, my students this year have really taken to it. They call it the Secret Society. We're looking to get some T-shirts made, and yeah, I mean, so we connect with community. I bring in guest speakers. I let them get tastes of other people in terms of some of my peers who are doing some successful things in their lives. Last year, we connected with a friend of mine who's a police officer, and he got to share with them what it means when you're pulled over or stopped by a police officer, because these are some of the interactions that they're going to experience potentially, that I've experienced, and I want to share that with them, right? But, it's important to have different voices. As influential as I am, they see me every day. So when you bring someone else in, I think that different voice and that different perspective essentially can have also an even greater impact. But yeah, I fear for our young Black men. I still deal with some of the nonsense that Black men deal with on a daily basis, whether it's interactions with the police or authority, or daily microaggressions where people are saying things that are hurtful and not understanding or comprehending the power of their words sometimes, and then having to deal with that. I'm at a space and place in my life where I'm no longer, sitting back and internalizing that or going to my family, my close circle of friends, and sharing that. Like, no, if you're wrong, I'm going to tell you at this stage and age. And people either respond to it or they don't, but I'm not going to deal with that burden by myself anymore.
Okay.
And I think that it's society's, right time for them to know. Like we talk about doing the work, like, yeah, you got to do the work yourself. It's a time in which we've all understood that it's happening in the world. There's been a major shift, and whether people say it's died down or not, like, to me, it's still very real. So do the work and be less ignorant. I'm not saying be perfect, just be less ignorant.
Yeah, wow, you're taking me to school. I'm in your classroom right now, Jay.
Good, I appreciate that.
And I know we spoke about like the theme of voice, and you having more of a voice now more than ever is kind of becoming clear in our conversation. So I know you are really vocal about taking a stance or having a firm, I would say, pathway where you're sharing your anti-racism views or experiences. So let us know a little bit about where that came from.
Right.
And maybe where you want to take that.
That's a good question. As you were asking that question, I thought about my first memory of a time in which I experienced anything to do with anti-oppression, right? Because what I focus on is obviously anti-Black, anti-racism, anti-oppression work. But I recall a time in which I was maybe 4, maybe 5, and back in the 90s, or at least my memory of it, the 90s, there was a organization called Bad C, Black Action Defense Committee, led by the late, great Dudley Laws. And my mother was a part of this committee. So again, coming back to my mom, she brought myself and my cousin down to a protest that was led in response to the killing of an unarmed Black man. I forget his name. Forgive me. Andrew, maybe? I forget. Anyways, yeah. And that was a time in which we were protesting against police brutality. Right?
How old were you then?
4, 5.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. So I was exposed to this, and if I obviously internalized that memory up until now, but I was exposed to this at an early age and early enough for it to sit with me. So to circle back to your question, like it's always been there, right? The work that I do now is obviously in my classroom, so on a grassroots level. I've done presentations for various boards, for new teachers, for experienced teachers, and we're talking about the same work: anti-oppression, anti-Black work, anti-Black racism work, anti-Black education. Unfortunately, but fortunately, it's at a space where I need to now dip into some of my experiences to share, because I don't think people just are able to get it on their own sometimes. You need to share with them.
Yeah.
And I think I'm not gonna say I've mastered it, but there's a space in which I'm able to go deep enough to not have to relive some of these traumas that I've been through, because it's also dangerous. And then outside of that, I've done continue to do some consultant work for various organizations who have hit me up, and I think that's where I'm going with that. That's where I want to go with that, to essentially form some sort of conglomerate, either by myself or with like-minded people, to do this work for organizations, peoples who need this work and are willing to bring in very real examples like myself and people who do this work outside of it.
Yeah, and wow, that is incredible.
Appreciate
Congratulations. That takes a lot of courage, firstly, because it's not a comfortable conversation. So I actually want to ask you, like, how do you deal with, sometimes we have so much to say, but we're so mindful of, it's going to make you feel bad, or it's an uncomfortable conversation, so I'm not going to say anything.
Right.
So how have you mastered that? It's such a heavy thing to speak about with people who may not always get it. Where does that courage come from? How do you do that?
I definitely haven't mastered it, because I'm still trying to figure that part out. There are days when it is heavy, very heavy, to the point where you don't want to get out of bed. There was a moment when 9 minutes and 29 seconds of a video came out in the world, and we witnessed a black man being murdered. And at that time, I think it hit me the heaviest. And we're doing our staff meetings virtually at that time. And I'm a very private person. I don't like to show emotion. I don't like to, especially if I don't trust very well. And that's my own baggage, I know that. But I broke down on camera with my peers.
Wow.
And I was so mad at myself for doing that. For one, obviously, I let them in and exposed the part of myself that I couldn't take back. But now I also, I shared with them, I think, how real of an emotion some of us were feeling with and dealing. And I would hope that something like that could trigger them enough to, again, do this work on their own and not have to have people like myself who were reliving some of these traumas that were dangerous and obviously emotion evoking. And it did for a moment. It definitely did for a moment, but we're right back where we started in certain situations. I'm not saying that the needle didn't move, but I'm still dealing with microaggressions on a daily. Right, I'm still being.
And what are some of those, like, what is that like for you?
Annoying, difficult, frustrating. It reminds me of how much more work there is to do. At times it feels like the needle of justice or the needle of social change or social reckoning is moving, but it's moving at such a slow pace that you ask yourself and you question, is this work worth it? Obviously my answer is gonna be yes, but you might ask me tomorrow or after something might happen at school or in the world, and I'm like, nah, I'm gonna take a time out for a bit.
Yeah.
Right, but ignorance still prevails, it still wins out in certain situations. And it's up to us, but not just us, allies, I'll speak about as well, having these quote unquote uncomfortable conversations and really leading by example too, because we can't win this fight on our own.
That's
You feel
right.
me? We cannot.
I celebrate you because I know that you are, as the other, that you're the other that many, many children and those coming up needs to actually change their trajectory. So thank you for being that redirector of lives. If you don't know it now,
Right.
like you'll probably feel the benefits and the impact of that later on. So thank you.
I appreciate that, definitely.
So Jay, I'm going to ask you just a series of thought starters, which I always think is so much fun to do. And you're welcome to answer them as sincerely as you would like.
Okay,
Okay?
let's do it.
So let's start with success is.
And that's the prompt, so you want me to finish that statement?
Yes, please.
Okay, so success is winning. Success is my whole team winning. I'm a big believer in your circle is super important. Your circle holds you up. Your circle is there to defend you, to have your back. So when I win, and what I mean by that is literally academic, educational, personal, financial, success, happiness, on my own schedule, and my whole team coming with me, yeah.
That's great. That's great. Okay, second one. Authenticity means.
So that's a tough one because authenticity could mean multiple things, but I think my honest answer about authenticity is letting down the veil for who Jay Williams is. And that has been the most difficult part, being vulnerable and allowing others into, this package or presentation as to who I am. So not being quote unquote on at all times. If you're being authentic, you're literally leading with, vulnerability, empathy, a means of allowing people in to see and then not being, well, obviously you're gonna be fearful, but understanding there's going to be a reaction because now people have seen this part of you that you haven't shown the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And that is as scary as a person for anybody, but as a black male in a world that doesn't love us, that's a scary thought.
Thank you for that. Okay. Leadership is.
This is a question I've been asked recently in some courses that I've been doing outside of the educational role. So leadership to me is shared responsibility. Leadership to me is not the sense that I need to lead with an iron fist. Leadership looks like multiple people coming together to make decisions on the betterment of whoever you're leading. It looks like leading by example, and it looks essentially opposite of everything we ever thought it looked like. So it's not top down. It's not stuffy in the sense that you need to fit a certain mold. If I'm being truthful, I'm doing these courses to become a principal, and as much as I could see myself doing that, it's a plan B right now, if I'm being very honest. So what leadership looks like to me, if I'm in that role, it looks like exactly what you see right here, still being me, still being the man. I have no problem saying that about myself, but essentially, disproving everything that everyone ever thought leadership should be or look like, but still being successful. It looks like equity. It looks like ensuring that everybody wins. Yeah.
Great. And finally, a mother's love is.
Did you just read my tattoo? That's crazy. A mother's love is never ending. A mother's love is essential to you being your best self. It is super impactful, and I'll speak to my own experiences, obviously, as a son. A mother's love for her son is expressed beyond words because we need that. In a world where, in a world where we, again, mentioned before that we feel unloved many times. As soon as we step out of our house, our front door, the world is out to, and these are just my thoughts, but I'm sure others agree, the world is out to get us. So that safety that we experience and love we experience from our mothers or grandmothers, our aunties, whoever our pseudo-mothers are at that time is important for our survival, if I'm being very real with you.
And being real is who you are and who I've felt this entire conversation. So thank you, Jay Williams, for having a chat with me. It's been absolutely a delight. Thank you very much for having me.
I'm a big fan of those that fall in what I refer to as the other category. The category that's unconventional, unpredictable even, but yet manages to stand out and unapologetically create their own lanes. So many of us can relate to feeling like we fit in between, and even relate to the discomfort or isolation that comes with that. But how many of us experience the true liberation when we get the courage to stand proudly in it? So many of us live the experience of immigrant parents, humble beginnings, the pursuit and teaching of excellence to ultimately make our mark and become who we were created to be. Thank you, Jay, for giving us a new template to stand fully in the versions of our authentic self.